Hi, everyone.
Greetings. We've started chapter 15 in the Proclaimer's book, Development of the Organization Structure. After a brief intro of 2 paragraphs, they have the subhead, Early Association of Bible Students. Now, we need to state right away why they felt it's so necessary in this book of some 600 pages, 700 pages. Why did they spend so much time on this subject? We talked about their chapter on the world before this.
Mm-hmm.
They revisit the subject several times in different contexts, right? This one is about the organization structure. They're justifying their thinking on this having changed significantly. Now they're going to try to explain why they changed.
Yeah.
But we should put this in a historical context. When this book comes out in 1993, Dwayne Magnani, James Penton, David Reed, and Ray Franz have already published their books in which they have exposed the truth about these early decades that the Watchtower has fudged in the past. In the Divine Purpose book, which is not even half the length of this one, and in the 1975 yearbook, they tell the history of the American JWs, which is JWs. They tell their history, but leaving out so much stuff that those 4 books, those 4 authors, and many others too, have in the meantime had a chance to expose a lot of the truth about their background. So this is damage control.
Yeah.
The whole book is damage control, but let's just look how they handle this, how they've changed from their view of structure and organization in the early association of the Bible students.
So we'll read the, 6 paragraphs?
On that subhead, yeah.
Yeah, Early Association of Bible Students. Readers of the Watchtower and related publications soon saw that in order to please God, they had to sever ties with any church that proved itself unfaithful to God by putting creeds and traditions of men ahead of His written word. But after withdrawing from the churches of Christendom, where did they go? In an article entitled The Ecclesia, Brother Russell pointed out that the true church, the Christian congregation, is not an organization with members who have subscribed to some man-made creed and have their names written on a church register. Rather, he explained, it is made up of persons who have consecrated or dedicated their time, talent, and life to God, and who have before them the prospect of sharing in heavenly kingdom with Christ, the heavenly kingdom with Christ. These, he said, are Christians who are united in bonds of Christian love and common interest, who respond to the direction of the Spirit of God, and who submit to the headship of Christ. Brother Russell was not interested in setting up some other arrangement, and he was strongly against contributing in any way to the sectarianism that existed among professed Christians.
I have to admit that when I read the Divine Purpose book and the 75 yearbook, I was not aware of any of this. So here, this is a semi-confession.
Yeah.
They go on, at the same time, he, Russell, fully appreciated the need for the Lord's servants to assemble together in harmony with the counsel of Hebrews 10, 23 to 25. He personally traveled to visit and upbuild readers of the Watchtower. Notice that phrase.
Yeah.
To visit and upbuild readers of the Watchtower, and to bring them together with others in their own area who were of like mind. Early in 1881, he requested that those who were holding regular meetings notify the Watchtower office as to where these were being held. He saw the value of keeping them in touch with one another. Well, the hidden text here, of course, is the hidden intention here is keeping them in control by the Watchtower from the Watchtower head office, right? However, Brother Russell emphasized that they were not attempting to set up an, quote, earthly organization, unquote. Rather, he said, we adhere only to that heavenly organization whose names are written in heaven. Because of Christendom's sordid history, reference to church organization usually reminded a person of sectarianism, clergy domination, and membership on the basis of adhering to a creed formulated by a religious council. So, when referring to themselves, Brother Russell felt that the term association was a better one.
He was well aware that Christ's apostles had formed congregations and appointed elders in each, but he believed that Christ was again present, though invisibly. So he was himself personally directing the final harvest of those who would be heirs with him. In view of the circumstances, Brother Russell initially felt that during the time of harvest, the arrangement for the elders that had existed in the first century Christian congregation was not needed. Nevertheless, as the Bible students grew in number, Brother Russell realized that the Lord was maneuvering matters in a manner different from what he himself had anticipated. An adjustment in viewpoint was needed. But on what basis? Yeah.
So what you're inadvertently admitting here, and you'll get into more specifics about that in the next page, is that you've done a triple flip-flop on the elders. He didn't believe in elders because we were in the time of the end. Notice they don't get the year in here.
Yes.
When are they in the time of the end? 1874. When are they in the time of the harvest? From 1874.
So I think even just the design of the book, because notice in the one paragraph they say when they're talking about his reasoning, they say early in 1881, and then when they talk about Christ was again present, it doesn't occur to you we're talking about before 1914. Because in your mind it's always 1914, Christ. Well, this is before 1914, and he thinks he's already present.
Yeah, and that's why he doesn't think that elders are necessary anymore, even though he admits they were there in the first century. So look what's happened. So since Russell dies, and the elder arrangement, by the way, is already in, because Russell saw that it was necessary. Toward the end of his life, he saw that it was necessary. So in the 1890s, he's already started to think in terms of local elders. But then Rutherford comes in and scraps the whole thing. And then by 1972, elders.
Yeah.
We're back to elders. So 3 times you've changed your viewpoint on the structure.
Yeah.
This is what you call progressive light.
Yeah.
Then you go back to this stuff about severing ties with any church that proved itself unfaithful to God by putting creeds and traditions of men ahead of the written word. You have to laugh when you read this, when you know the history, because this is the pot calling the kettle black. You're against sectarianism. You're saying he was very against sectarianism. What does he create? Not a sect, not a denomination, a cult.
But the phrasing in the second paragraph, where they say, Brother Russell pointed out that the true church, the Christian congregation, is not an organization with members who have subscribed to some man-made creed and have their names written on a church register. You do all that. You do that now. But your creed is not a couple of paragraphs like the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed. Yours is pages. When I got baptized, I had to answer 80 questions. But since then, it's been high and low and everywhere in between. But there's always a lot of questions.
So your creed is in effect
pages.
At least pages and pages of things you have to master before you can get baptized.
And what does creed mean? I don't think the average witness, if you asked, would really know what that word means. It means I believe. So the difference between what you think it's necessary to believe as a witness is everything that the Watchtower is currently saying is truth. That's what you have to believe. With the church, it stayed the same.
1,600 years.
Yeah, it's
and
just
more.
basics.
And how long is that creed? Well, it's about that long.
Yeah.
About 2 paragraphs on the average page.
And it's about Christ and his resurrection, his death and resurrection. It's very focused.
The Apostles' Creed is almost entirely biblical language, and it's minimal, but it's obviously centered on, I think there's about 16 or 17 propositions altogether in those 2 paragraphs. And it's centered on Christ.
And if you're talking about registration, my goodness, you guys are so focused on numbers.
Yeah.
And you are registered at the organization's Bethel. If, there's a file on you. Do you realize that? Do you think about that? Well, don't complain about them having you on a roll And
What?
and you having files on people, and every judgment that's made on them is under file.
And if you read these paragraphs carefully enough, you can see why it is a cult, not just a sect or a denomination. Because look at the phrases, connect some phrases from different paragraphs. In this second paragraph, you've got the phrase, the direction of the Spirit of God as being the emphasis in the early days. Russell's saying that all of the brothers loosely affiliated at this point, but connected to him somehow through the reading of the Watchtower. They were guided by the Spirit of God collectively. But by the time he's dead, of course, it's narrowed down to, well, they're following the teachings of Pastor Russell.
Yeah.
But and you admit that. In the third paragraph, you say people that were readers of the Watchtower, they needed to be brought together. So
Who
now
were
there's
of
one
like
channel.
mind.
That's a cult, by the way, one channel.
Yeah.
And then you connect that one to a phrase that's in paragraph 4. The basis of adhering to a creed. You're critiquing people who have creeds and adhere to them, at the same time admitting that all of your members are readers of the Watchtower.
Yeah.
And today, 100 years after his death,
Yeah.
they are now not just affiliated with the Watchtower, affiliated with God's organization.
Yeah.
They are obedient to
So
God's
you
organization.
see this in the baptismal questions. First it's you're associated with the one true religion or whatever. So, but now it's more than just being associated with or in fellowship with. It's now you have to be attached to them, and you have to be obedient to them.
Not asking
Questions. It's a loyalty to them.
Yeah.
What happened to the Holy Spirit and Christ when you have to be loyal to the organization?
Well, again, they've admitted it. And in fact, they are by definition a cult, because in the beginning it was the principle of unity was attachment to Russell as the faithful and discreet slave, and to the Watchtower, which is the agency for which he expressed himself. But
it's
nowadays
gotten tighter and
it
tighter.
is the governing body and the Watchtower organization. So it's been a cult. It was a cult in process of being established at the time, even though the word organization was still a dirty word in those days.
Yeah.
Throughout Russell's reign, that is. It was a dirty word, because he thought of it, as they admit here, as a sign of authoritarianism and control from above. Well, he's right. It is.
Yeah.
But,
So he liked
but when
the word.
when Rutherford in around 1925-26 wrote the book Deliverance, and started the idea going of two organizations. There's only two, God's organization and the devil's.
Yeah.
Though they still kept the God's organization, but they don't so much talk about the devil's organization singular anymore, but rather Christendom, plural, and false religion, which is really false religions, right? So the definitions have changed somewhat, but the idea, the dynamic of it is still the same. That not only do you have to be attached to God's one source of truth, but you have to be now under compulsion. Let's face it, it's only since the 1950s that disfellowshipping happens because of what you now call apostasy. Yeah. So for most of your history, your early history, that was not the case. 70-something years, there was no obvious coercion going on. But Rutherford was a master of propaganda, so he didn't really need to. But now you have the power, and your local elders, who weren't there when I joined, they weren't there. Your local elders now have the power of life and death over every Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah. Now, there were some things you wanted to read from David Reed's book on the literature, specifically about these, their creed, basically.
Yeah, well, you might remember we've plugged this book before by David Reed, Jehovah's Witness literature, notice that.
Yeah.
And he has a couple of paragraphs here on the two organization books, which most of us will remember. The one I studied in the 70s, and then another one that came along about a decade later. He says about the original organization book, talking about creeds, we're talking now about, does the Watchtower have a creed? Well, David Reed says this organizational manual and catechism, notice that, catechism, replaced the 1967 book, Your Word is a Lamp to My Foot. It caused considerable internal turmoil by calling for the appointment of a body of elders in each congregation. So this is the big change,
Mm-hmm.
1972, with the chief responsible position to rotate annually among these elders. This, in effect, unseated the powerful congregation servant, pastor that is, in each local JW church, some of whom had ruled unchallenged for many years, and made him just one of the elders. The rotation arrangement was gradually phased out after a dozen years, with one position at a time being made permanent once again, so another flip-flop.
Yeah.
And then that's about the Organization for Kingdom Preaching and Disciple Making, 1972. And then Reed says this about its replacement, which was Organized to Accomplish Our Ministry, 1983.
Mm-hmm.
This replaced Organization for Kingdom Preaching and Disciple Making as a handbook for elders and ministerial servants in caring for congregation meetings, house-to-house preaching, and judicial matters. It also contains a new catechism of more than 100 questions for baptismal candidates.
Yeah.
The book is not distributed to outsiders, but only to witnesses themselves and new disciples approaching baptism, reflecting tightened organizational control following the purge of 1980-81. That's the Bray Franz purge. It warns them, quote, "This is no time for independent thinking." That's on page 8. A theme further elaborated, and then he gives you a couple of watchtowers on avoid independent thinking and fight against independent thinking.
Yeah.
So the tightening of the reins is very obvious if you study the entire history of these 140 plus years now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's our link?
We are linking to a series we did from a document that we'd written about slaves of men. So it's like characteristics of cults.
So 3 videos altogether, I believe.
So we're doing, I think it's actually 4, but anyways, we're doing part 3,
This is
way
part
to
3.
the way.
The way to the way.
You know, if any group tells you they're the way to the way.
Yeah, I think the heading, the subheading in that particular track, which you can get, by the way, on onewonders.org in the PDF archive.
Mm-hmm.
Christ is the way, and we are the way to the way.
Yeah.
And that's cults.
Yeah. And we'll put the playlist on, but you can just, it'll be on that playlist that we're putting on, Cults and Propaganda.
Cults and Propaganda playlist. Sure.
Slaves of Man. If you type that in, you would find the beginning of it. Yeah.
See you next time.
Bye.